Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, a lot of chatter during the last couple of weeks and months about this Florida State team, and it got to the point where I was scrolling on Twitter the other day, and I saw somebody list all the NFL draft picks Florida State had, and at the end of that, I saw them say they're going 7-5. And at some point, we just have to say, yeah, Florida State, they lose a lot to the NFL draft. That is certainly no secret. The Florida State fans, they know that. But there are some reasons that this Florida State team can just reload in 2024. And you kind of take a look at some of the young talent on this team. But I think more importantly, what Mike Norvell has done in the transfer portal and say, I'm not going to stand up here right now in the middle of June and say Florida State's going to win a national championship. You make no mistake about it. College football playoff contender, ACC title contender. Want to get into just a few reasons why the boys are believing in Florida State heading into 2024. Before we get into it, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Florida State fans. So much support that you guys have shown the boys, really going back to the 2023 season. It's no secret. We love talking about this program. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, we're going to give you our 5 reasons why Florida State reloads in 2024. There's probably 10 to 15 reasons. Would love to hear some reasons for you guys in the comments section. And Dill, let's get into reason number 1. And that's the offensive line. This was probably the worst aspect of this Florida State team in 2023. And that's not necessarily saying that unit was bad. It's just Florida State was checking every single box last year as a team. Going into 2024, I think you just got to start off with the experience. I mean, 4 guys that played over 400 snaps on the Florida State offensive line in 2023 are coming back. Then you add Richie Leonard IV, has played a ton of football in the SEC. TJ Ferguson, very high upside. If there's any reason to start with believing in this Florida State team heading into 2024, and if they do end up winning the ACC, making a run in the college football playoffs, you're talking about an offensive line that takes a massive step in the right direction in the 2024 year.
Yeah, I think honestly, look, I mean, the pass protection was okay, not great. I didn't think that was their weakness. I thought in the run game, I thought they were far too reliant on Trey Benson making plays happen, kind of without a ton of help, making guys miss behind the line of scrimmage and hitting big plays. But I think if you kind of watch, that wasn't an offensive line that was resetting the line of scrimmage a whole lot. Not an offensive line you can count on to get like a 3-yard minimum or a 3-yard floor on each rush. So they were very boom and bust in that department. And I think when you look at their overall offensive efficiency numbers, I think their inability to consistently get yards on first and second and down on the ground really hurt what they were trying to do on offense.
If there's one thing, especially in the run game, that I think you're looking at an improvement from Florida State is the efficiency. Now, you look at that Florida State offense really as a whole last year, it was very reliant on the explosive play. Now, you make no mistake about it. That is one of Mike Norvell's specialty. Going back to his time at Memphis, he knows how to dial up those explosive plays. That's not going to change. But if you're Florida State heading into 2024, can you find a little bit more efficiency? Can you routinely stay on the field a little bit more and just not be so reliant on the explosive plays? And I think having an offensive line that's a little bit more dominant at the point of attack certainly helps. And
I like adding 2 new guards because, frankly, I thought Maurice Smith looked really, really good. I think Jeremiah Byers, especially in the run game, can be good. I thought they were playing really, really physically imposing, if you will. I didn't think the guards were kind of picking up their slack again, kind of leading to some of those plays where it felt like you had to go too horizontal at times just because you weren't moving guys off the ball. I like that they had 2 new guards. Richie Leonard, very physical guard out of Florida, big fan of his. And TJ Ferguson, I think, just gives you the upside you need. Maybe you've lacked just by nature, not really recruiting the offensive line as well they're starting to get that going, but for a while, it didn't seem like they were bringing in those real top-end guys up front.
TJ Ferguson gives you that high upside offensive lineman. Now, one other thing that I would add in terms of why I'm believing in this offensive line, and it's kind of a concept that we've talked about a lot, and that is continuity, right? You return every single coaching staff on this roster, or in this program, I should say, heading into 2024. But Alex Atkins done a phenomenal job with this group. But I think more importantly, a lot of these players have played a lot of football together over the past couple of years. You look at Darius Washington, Keandre Jones, Byers, Maurice Smith, all four of those guys, I don't even know if all four of them are going to be starting, but all four of them played over 400 snaps for Florida State last year. Then you add Richie Leonard IV, who's played a ton of football in the SEC. And the era of college football with the transfer portal, where it's just kind of a revolving door, the offensive line, a position where you want to have that chemistry, go back to Michigan in 2023. I think Florida State is going to be one of the higher chemistry units, if that's even a thing to say, heading into 2024. Now, Dill, I think the next thing I want to talk about on the offensive side of the football, and it kind of relates to the offensive line, is the efficiency, right? You go back to Florida State last year. I mean, they were not very good on third downs. They were 88th in the country. And then you dive into the games and look at the numbers and say, why was that the case? They didn't win on first and second down very often, right? You look at the points Florida State scored. They were a top 30 scoring offense. It was awfully reliant on hitting explosive plays, whether it was Keon Coleman, whether it was Trey Benson running the football. Hey, Mike Norvell, the explosive plays, we said that's not going to stop. But can Florida State start winning on first and second down a little bit more often? That's going to be a huge storyline. Not only the offensive line, DJU's a hammer in terms of the physicality that he runs with. You look at a guy in Roydell Williams coming over from Alabama, hammer, runs the ball physically. Keziah Combs, Cam Davis. I look at the running game and say, maybe we can be a little bit more consistent running the football on first and second down. And maybe Florida State just gets better on third down because of that heading into 2024.
I'm kind of with you. I don't think it's a mention is Roydell Williams better than Trey Benson. Like, honestly, back-to-back, maybe not. But again, you might have a bit of a different flavor of how you run the ball. And you didn't have a Roydell Williams last year. I mean, Toafili, good running back for sure, but more of a playmaker in space, a guy you want to get out on the perimeter and catching the ball. Like, that's where he really shines. So, again, you had guys like Benson, Toafili, guys who I don't think were those just grind you down running backs. I think adding Roydell Williams, the way he runs, how much more heavy he is in terms of just being able to kind of set the floor a little higher in terms of what they're going to do down to down. I think that'll be a huge part, along with the fact that, hey, you're right, DJU, when he wants to run physically, he can run as physically.
And DJU likes to run the ball physically. Like, there's been interviews where he's like, I want to run the football. I feel like I'm involved in the game. You couldn't really treat Jordan Travis like that because you had to try to keep him healthy. DJU, I think I made the joke the other day. I thought it was one of my funnier ones. If I'm worrying about DJU I'm worried about the linebacker who's trying to tackle DJU as opposed to someone like DJU getting hurt. I'm excited about what Florida State can do on offense. And then you kind of sprinkle in, and I'll just kind of throw this out there. I think you see some like 22 personnel or some 21 personnel, like two running back sets with DJU back there, kind of get creative with how you use Jalen Lucas and Lawrence Toafili. I just kind of feel like Mike Norvell's got enough weapons to kind of get this run game going in 2024 on top of having an offensive line. And we probably should have mentioned this. If they just stay a little bit healthier, like I'm pretty sure most of those Florida State guys up front were playing probably at 50% throughout the duration of 2023. They're deeper, ideally healthier. They've played a lot of football. Some reason to believe that this Florida State offense doesn't take these step back that I think a lot of people do on paper. Now, moving to the defensive side of the football, Dill, the one reason I believe in this Florida State defense, that's the secondary. I think you're looking at a top 3 secondary in the country. And why I want to start with the secondary, where did Florida State struggle a little bit on defense last year? Stopping the run, right? They gave up 4.2 yards per carry. That was 60th in the country. 153 rushing yards per game. That was 61st in the country. Not necessarily bad numbers, but when you compare them to where the other numbers were with Florida State, they were probably down. Can Florida State get better stopping the run? Dill, you got two cornerbacks in Fentrell Cypress and AZ Thomas, one of the best cornerback duos that we see in the country. If you have two elite cornerbacks, can you get a little bit creative in terms of loading that box, bringing in guys like Shaheem Brown into the box and kind of just putting some more numbers in the box to stop the run and get better at stopping the run heading into 2024? I think that's a intriguing storyline for Florida State on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point to note, especially the fact that you're retaining a decent amount of continuity in that back end too. Obviously, Shaheem Brown's played a fair amount, so you only got to slot in a couple of older, more experienced transfer portal guys. Earl Little, obviously, super talented, probably not the maybe not the experience, but like, again, a guy who's played at.
I'll say this on Earl Little Jr. I mean, you look at the guys that he might have squeezed out of Florida State, someone like Greedy Vance, who I thought was a really good football player for Florida State. Then he just hits the transfer portal, goes to USC. I think that tells you a little bit about how this coaching staff feels about Earl Little Jr. heading into the 2024 season, and kind of diving into the run defense and talking about reasons to believe in Florida State getting better against the run. DJ Lundy being on the field more. DJ Lundy might not be a top 100 NFL draft pick because I think the sideline to sideline athleticism, the ability in space might not totally be there. And you talk about linebackers that can play in the tackle box and stop the run. I don't know if you have a better one in the country than DJ Lundy. Led this team in run stops last year. But on top of that, Dill, can Patrick Payton kind of emerge as being a little bit better against the run? That's kind of the step that I, at least in my opinion, I want him to take. We all know he's an elite pass rusher, one of the best in the country heading into 2024 as he continues to kind of develop that frame, which is still a work in progress for Patrick Payton. Can he become a little bit more physical in the run game? Because I look at Patrick Payton, Sione Lolea coming in from Oregon State and say, that could be a unit. We all know what Sione can do, stopping the run. There's some pieces where you're like, all right, Florida State, you lose guys like Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. That certainly hurts, almost guys that are impossible to replace. I don't know if the drop-off is going to be as big as a lot of people expect it to be in the 2024 year.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the edge, again, obviously losing Jared Verse, he is not necessarily a replaceable guy. He is really, really good. But I think you have the talent in that room to be just fine. I don't see the edge play being an issue at all. Honestly, I kind of look back. I think what Fisk was giving them last year is the real part they're going to have to find a way to replace. And honestly, I think that's going to come from, can you get Darrell Jackson going at the rate you want him to get going? Can a guy like Daniel Lyons, who I actually thought played really, really good football last year, make that jump? I think, again, I kind of look, my bigger question will be much more on the inside for this Florida State team, just because Fisk was so dominant for them, played so many snaps and rushed the passer, stopped the run, was just really versatile. I think, again, no problems with their edge play. I think they brought the transfer portal guys and have been developing guys like Byron Turner and Patrick Payton. I'm looking for someone to step up in that middle.
The defensive line's a really interesting conversation because on paper, it's really hard to sit here and argue in the middle of June that this Florida State defensive line is going to be better without Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. But is it going to be deeper? And that's kind of the story of this Florida State team is, yes, you lose a lot of NFL talent on paper to the NFL, but you're starting to see Mike Norvell and the wins that they've had in the transfer portal and on the high school recruiting trail kind of manifest itself into a deeper football team than you saw over the last couple of years that Mike Norvell has had. And I think the last thing you want to talk about is the pass rush, which, I mean, it was one of the best pass rush units we saw in the country, top 5 in sack rate. What's the step back going to be in that? Patrick Payton, elite pass rusher. Marvin Jones Jr. is probably the biggest wild card. If he can emerge as like an elite pass rusher in the ACC, which coming from the spring practice notes I've been reading, certainly a possibility. Then you enter in a guy like Sione Lolea. I look at this and say you have 4 or 5 edge rushers that we're feeling pretty good about for Florida State. And again, the depth of this unit could be better than it was last year. And again, that's another reason just to kind of believe that this Florida State team certainly doesn't go 7-5 in the 2024 year. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think people sleep on just the fact that, again, every good team is going to lose good players to the NFL draft. I think you kind of look teams, I think that maybe haven't been sustained as much. Like Florida State kind of just emerged, if you will, became that elite team. I think they've got it rolling in the right way. I think like you're starting to now see the guys develop up through this program and play really, really good football. You lose a couple corners, you bring in A.Z. Thomas, replace Green, just filter it in, make it work. I just think Florida State right now, yeah, you look at the top end talent, it is certainly there, but also the fact that I think you can be much more comfortable with, again, seeing the way Byron Turner played in that spring game towards the end of the year last year. You're starting to see these guys filter up through this program where it is more reloading rather than rebuilding. I think that's something people like to sleep on when teams put a lot of guys in the draft. It's like when you're a team that's gotten to that point, you have the culture the way you have it, like what Florida State I think is starting to build. I don't think you should be as worried about this like rebuild versus reload conversation because you're you're inherently reloading when you're at Florida State.
The last thing you mentioned, and I guess this is a great way to close it, culture. I think, again, you talk about like underrated conversations that, especially with us, like that's probably something that I just sleep on. I kind of become too much of a nerd, start looking at the recruit numbers, start looking at the players, and you kind of just forget like teams that have the winning cultures normally win football games on Saturday, right? You look at Michigan or Georgia or Alabama, just a winning culture that's been built up in those programs. You look at Florida State and you kind of just say, that's kind of coming along in Tallahassee. I think Mike Norvell has done a beautiful job, not only building a very talented roster, using the portal, using the high school recruiting trail, but also building just a really strong culture. And that's one of the question marks a lot of times you have with a team that wants to use the portal like Mike Norvell and Florida State do. Can you maintain that culture? They've proven that they can use the transfer portal heavily, make their team better, but also have a very good culture within this program. I think that's probably the last reason that, like, look, I'm just believing in Mike Norvell in this Florida State program. Again, are we saying they're going to win a national championship? No, they're not my prediction to win a national championship. They certainly ain't going 7-5 either. Dill, that's how we'll close it. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, all the support you guys show continues to mean the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.